Okay, I'm checking the signal. Alright, everything looks normal. Let me check the Ruby platform really quickly. Yep, everything's running as it should. Okay. Oh shoot. They can hear me. Okay, Dan, you'll be live in a few seconds. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Dan Marek, and welcome to our office hours or Ask Me Anything about chef-related food. My name is Dan Marek, and I'm the Director of Plant-Based Culinary and Development. Sorry, I'm having a couple technical difficulties here, so bear with us just for a second. So I am Ruby's Director of Plant-Based Culinary and Development. I'll be answering all of your questions today about anything plant-based culinary. Just some housekeeping to keep track of. On the top right of your screen, you'll see a box that says Add Question Here. You can actually just type any question you have in that box and then hit the button that says Add. It'll actually come up on the queue on the right-hand side, and then you have the choice to be able to hit the plus button if you'd like to be able to upvote that comment. All right, so let's get started into our event here, and make sure to add anything you'd like to our questions on the right-hand side. So again, my name is Dan Marek. I've been in the plant-based space for about 25 years now. In the last year, I've been the Director of Plant-Based Culinary for Ruby. Before that, I actually came from Whole Foods Market, where I worked for Whole Kids Foundation, really working towards getting kids to understand nutrition and what real food is and where their food actually comes from. Before that, I did recipe testing and ran a venue and was a healthy eating specialist at the flagship store of Whole Foods Market, Lamar in Austin, Texas, where I still live today. So let's get to some of our questions today. So Diana has a question here. Dear Chef Marek, will Ruby be providing us with the opportunity or the process of making vegan butter and seitan from scratch? Also, there are many comments that seitan is an unhealthy protein being highly processed. Is this a myth? Internet is confusing. So actually, yeah, depending on the course that you're doing, we do a vegan butter and a seitan from scratch. The plant-based professional class has a vegan butter that I actually came up with and did a film of, so you can see, you can actually see how you make it live. And we actually have a seitan version in there as well. We have a couple different versions. We have one that is like a braising roast, which is really nice. That makes a sliceable kind of almost like a brisket. And the other one is a sausage, which is actually really nice that you can add different flavor profiles to and use those for like an Italian style sausage. But both of them really nice as well. Seitan being an unhealthy because it's processed. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is a processed ingredient. What you're doing is taking the gluten out of wheat. So you're just basically taking all the gluten out of it and making it into, something that's very kind of dense. And a lot of people say that's not really that healthy for you. So a lot of people have gluten gluten sensitivities, this is something they would have to stay completely away from because it's basically 100% that. Now, a lot of people say it's not, it's not bad for you, but again, in moderation is probably the best way to do that. I know I'll have seitan every so often, but I don't eat it very regularly. And if I eat too much of it, I can usually feel it in my gut afterward. So, I think that it's a great product, and it's something, especially for people that are trying to make that conversion over from meat into a more plant-based style. I think it's a great thing to be able to use for that as well. But it is still a processed ingredient. So more often than not, when I'm cooking at my table, I'm going to be using vegetables instead of a seitan. So I'll be doing like a mushroom, version of something to get that kind of meaty like texture, either by using something like a portobello or a maitake or shiitake as well, are nice ones in there. And I'll also use things like trumpet mushrooms to be able to do other kind of meat-like consistencies. All great options. And seitan's a wonderful thing. We do show you how to be able to do it, to be able to get that nice sliceable one, and to be able to do a sausage. Both are great, but it's not something I would include on your daily, diet to be able to start off with that. So. That's a great question. Looks like we have another one from you, Diana. Big thanks to answering our questions. Much appreciated. Of course, anytime. I've tried many vegan butters and have not found one without preservatives or a fair cost. Would you have a vegan butter recipe? One that is without coconut oil. So we do have a couple vegan butters on Ruby. Actually, one of them, I know Richard just posted on this chat. So if you look to the bottom of the chat there, you'll see one that is actually a classic that Chad Sarno used to do quite often. It's the roasted garlic and onion butter. And it's actually a really pretty easy recipe where it's basically garlic and onion and vegetable stock with some other herbs. I think it's like thyme and black pepper. And you basically roast those in the oven at 400 degrees. It's a pretty simple recipe. And then you also take soaked cashews and take them out and then blend them up with some dairy milk and then combine the two different sets there. Now, it's not like your traditional, like a Miyoko's butter or something like that, or even some of the other, oil-based butters. It's definitely a little bit different. We have one of those too, like I mentioned, in Plants Plus and Plant-Based Pro. We have one that is made out of coconut oil. That's definitely going to be more like your traditional butter, but that's the thing about butter is it's all fat. If it's dairy or if it's not. So typically to get that much fat out of it, you're going to use an oil of some sort to be able to get that spreadability. Now, this garlic and onion butter doesn't have the oil in it, which is great. And it uses the cashews for the fat as well. And then you're getting a different kind of flavor profile because you're using your onions and garlic. So that is to be said. It's not like something you're going to be putting on, I don't know, like something sweet or something like that, but it is a great savory option for breads using that garlic butter as well. So I would check out that recipe. It's definitely a great one. It's been well tested over time, and Ruby grads love that one too. All right, our next one also from Diana. With Ruby highlighting the health importance of cooking with no oil, I love cooking French crepes. 1 cup of whole spelt flour to 2 cups of unsweetened soy. All historical recipes call to use butter or oil. How can we cook without? Much gratitude. So that's actually a great point. French crepes are one of those things that are a little hard to do without using oil or butter to be able to help make the nonstick surface. So there are a couple things that you can do. And one of them is get a really, really good nonstick pan, or use a very well seasoned pan. So both of those things are probably going to be your best bet. I've not had a whole lot of success doing it without oil, doing crepes, because they typically stick pretty quickly and pretty easily to the pan. If you're using, like an iron skillet or something like that, using the very well seasoned one would probably help a little bit, but you do have to remember that a lot of that seasoning is coming from an oil, basically from cooking on it for years. What I typically will do personally is I will actually take a non-stick pan and spray it with oil, and then take a paper towel and wipe the inside out, so I don't have an excess of oil. I'm not creating an overbalance of calories in it, but I'm still creating a very non-stick surface. Now, you you can do that, and you can probably, cook maybe 2 or 3 crepes, but you'll probably have to do it again because it'll soak up any of the residue oil that's on there. So crepes definitely going to be a little hard to not stick to a pan unless you have a very good non-stick pan, or a very well seasoned one as well. So I hope that helps, Diana. All right. It looks like I have another one from Diana here, and it's also asking about the butter without coconut oil. Will it show us how to make it from scratch? Yes, it will. That's the recipe that was linked above for the garlic and onion butter is the one that's the no oil version. But again, it is not, it's a savory butter to be able to go with that. So it almost has like an herb kind of taste to it, but unbelievably tasty one too. All right, Mary Ellen, with grilling season arriving, I'm curious, what are your favorite plant-based things to grill, and how do you best grill using no oil? Or is there a time when just a little oil is worth to really improve the flavor? So yes, I actually love grilling vegetables. One of my biggest tips that I tell people is don't oil the vegetables, oil the grill. And why? It's kind of the same thing with the crepe. What you're doing is making a non-stick surface on your grill. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of oil, put it onto a paper towel, and then use tongs to wipe down the grill just to make sure that the grill top surface is a little bit of oil on it, but it's basically making it a non-stick surface and it won't stick as much. Now, a lot of that oil is going to burn off as you're cooking, which is great because it's not going right directly onto your vegetables. Some of my favorite things to grill, corn on the cob is definitely one of my top ones. I also love to do eggplant. Eggplant I actually do quite often to make baba ganoush just because it has that nice smoky flavor to it. So what I'll do is just slice them in half and put them upside down. Well, I guess face side down, the cut side down onto the grill. And then let that cook and almost char, and the inside will just come scoop right out, and you can mix that with some tahini and garlic, and it makes a great baba ganoush. So good. But yeah, corn on the cob is definitely one of my favorites. Other kind of staples like zucchini. I like to do things sometimes sweet too, like pineapple or mango are wonderful additions to be able to put on the grill. And that like nice smokiness actually adds a really, really good flavor profile. And it starts to caramelize some of the natural sugars in those fruits. So you get an entirely different effect. So it's really, really wonderful. But yeah, so those are some of my favorites to be able to do that. And the oil, again, just lightly coating the grill panels with oil and very, very light touch, I think is probably the best way to make sure it's not going to stick. I hope that helps. All right, Bernadette, what would you recommend as a substitute for coconut milk? You're allergic to it, and I want the Whole Foods cookbook. Thank you. So let's see. If you're looking for a substitute for coconut milk, that really kind of depends on what you're cooking. A lot of times coconut milks are used in things like curries, and some Thai dishes and things like that as well. Now, if you're looking to be able to cook into that, I would just kind of recommend taking your sauce in a little bit different direction. What you're kind of looking for in that is a little bit of the fat, but a lot of the liquid as well. So doing a vegetable stock and maybe a combination with something that has like a nut butter or something like that would be really good. Either a peanut or a cashew or something like that might be a nice combination to be able to get the fat that you're looking for out of something. Peanut is definitely going to have a stronger flavor. So if you're looking for something that has a little less flavor, something maybe like the cashew or macadamia nut might be a nice version. And what you would do is basically soak the cashews or the macadamia nuts overnight. Macadamia nuts can take a little bit longer. But then after they've soaked overnight, you can put them into a high-speed blender with a little bit of water and turn them into a paste, which is really nice to be able to use in a host of different things. We do a cashew bechamel through Ruby, doing that same kind of a process. But if you're looking to do something like a curry or something like that, that could actually be a nice, other kind of a take or a different spin on that. If you're using coconut milk for other things, as far as like I've seen people use it for creamers or for other kinds of milk, you can also substitute out something like an almond milk or a soy milk to be able to make that same effect happen. In fact, almond milk might actually be a good substitute in those curries as well, just because it's been, it's a little bit easier to be able to get into. But otherwise, soaking the nuts overnight, breaking them down with a high process or high powered blender would probably be my best bet to be able to replace those in something like a curry. Hope that helps, Bernadette. David, do you have a favorite plant-based protein to eat and to work with, and if so, why? That's as far as favorites go, I switch it up quite often. My family definitely does tofu pretty regularly, and I do it in very vast amounts of ways. For lunch today, I had tofu on a Caesar salad that I had made. It was and it had tofu in it in two different ways. Actually, the dressing was a silken tofu that I had added some kelp granules and garlic to, and some apple cider vinegar. And just literally kind of made it up off the top of my head, but basically made a Caesar type dressing. And then I also did like a Greek tofu as like a feta instead. So I cubed the feta and then marinated it in lemon juice with oregano, a little bit of water and garlic, a little bit of salt and black pepper and nutritional yeast, and made that as kind of my brine. And then let the tofu soak overnight. It was a firm tofu, and it holds up really, really well as a feta. So that's actually a great couple of ways to be able to use tofu. But I also do things like tempeh quite often as well. And when I'm using tempeh, I typically boil the tempeh before doing anything with it, and then I'll cut it up into the slices or the chunks that I want to, and then cook it with and I'll do that in a host of different ways on tempeh as well, where you can slice it up to be able to put into sandwiches or to put into curries. I do a lot of different things with those kinds of proteins as well. Now, outside of that, I actually, for that main dish-ish, I typically go for mushrooms quite often, and it's not as your protein, so much, but it, you get a lot of the umami flavor that you're looking to be able to get out of the mushrooms. So those are something that are on my plate almost every single dish. Outside of those, I'll actually go for quinoa quite often as well, just because it's a nice kind of alternative to rice using, a different grain that actually has the protein in it. It's something that kids can get, wrap their heads around pretty easily too. But those are probably the ones that I use the most, are quinoa, tofu, and tempeh. And tofu is probably the one I use more often than the other ones. Hope that helps, David. Let's see, JW, will I have access to this course after the June deadline? I haven't been able to keep up, but I do want to complete the course after the deadline. Is that possible? So depending on what course you're in, you do have, you pretty much everybody has lifetime access to their course content. This sounds like something you might want to contact support with. So I would email support@ruby.com to be able to get your exactly your scenario. But kind of just a general answer from our support would be that after you graduate, your 30 days expire, whichever comes first. The only areas locked will be quizzes, instructor graded assignments, and the question and support function. Other than that, you'll still have all the lessons, the recipes, etc., to review at your leisure. If you've not completed the program by the deadline and decide to complete your certificate at some point, you can also purchase an extension. And you can do that just by going to your dashboard, locate your course, and then click the Need More Time link. And you'll actually be able to buy a 30-day extension, depending on the course. I think if it's Forks Over Knives, I can't remember the exact price on it, but that's probably what I would do. But for your specific individual purpose, contact support@ruby.com and they can give you more detail on your unique situation. All right, Carol, thank you, Dan, for your service to our community advancing the health of our children. Thank you very much. I love doing that. I completed the Ruby plant-based program, and my goal is to impact families for greater health. Can you give a couple suggestions as how to begin that journey? That's wonderful that you've chosen to do that, Carol. I think that one of the best ways that you can really help, is to go into your local community, people that you actually know pretty well, to be able to kind of start that impact. Now, you can ask in your direct community if you have ways to be able to help, children's areas, either through after school programs or by doing some volunteer work. I love to do things at like farmers markets to be able to get kids to explore vegetables in that way as well. I've done lots of cooking demos at farmers markets too, where I'll do like a build a salad competition with kids, and then everybody makes their own salad and then picks out their own dressings to either make or to put on, and see which one's the best one out of a tasting or something like that. But there are a host of different ways to be able to make that happen. I think the best way to do it is to find what's comfortable for you and your community, to figure out how much time you can dedicate to being able to give back to those families as well. And if you're really full on, go for an organization that does it full time. So I did that for years. I did that for 8 years at Whole Kids Foundation, or I directly I worked full time at a job, really trying to change or move the needle a little bit on school nutrition, and really trying to get kids to understand nutrition a little bit better, and emphasizing fruits and vegetables and trying to get kids to eat more plants. Now there are a host of different organizations out there like that, like Whole Kids Foundation from the Humane Society has a wonderful program where they're teaching. A lot of different universities also depend on RDs to be able to help do some of that work. So there's always opportunities to help some registered dietitians on doing some cooking demos and things like that as well too. So there's really a host of different ways to be able to help in your community, but everybody's community is very unique and different to them. So I would probably ask your friends that you trust around you to be able to kind of get a start with that, or maybe even look through some different groups and meetup groups that might be able to help you on the local level too. And then definitely check out some local farms, local farmers markets, and CSA programs, so community supported agriculture programs. All of those are great places to be able to start, kind of working with food a lot more. You might also want to look at some different soup kitchens or some different organizations that help kids directly in after school programs, or being able to help supply food for some of those as well. But that's great. I really commend you for doing that, Carol. It's a lifelong journey and a lot of fun. You'll get a lot out of that. So congratulations, and have fun after graduating the class. Speaking of graduating, Heather, I just graduated today. Congratulations. Can I add my professional plant-based certification badge to my personal chef business website? You absolutely can. You can get the Crudley badge that we have. The Crudley badge is a wonderful way to be able to do that. It's a nice little badge that you can put right up onto your website or your LinkedIn or your Facebook or anything like that as well too. As far as the certification, the actual certificate, you might not want to put that on your webpage, but you are more than welcome to if you want to. I think the badge is actually a really good way to be able to show that off, though. And if you're looking for ways to be able to do that, it should be probably one of the last links on your class, or you can email Randall with 2 L's at ruby.com or support@ruby.com, and we can help you get that badge for you. But congratulations, Heather. Welcome to the plant-based community. So, Aaron, given your past experience in grocery industry with Whole Foods, what trends or changes do you see in ready-to-eat food segments? Or could you share a little more about your experience in the Austin, Texas market? Yeah, so in Austin, Texas, it's been an amazing journey. I moved to Austin 17 or 18 years ago, and been plant-based that entire time. So it's totally it's definitely been something that has evolved through the years, but it's also been nice because we have seen a lot of kind of ups and downs in the plant-based communities. So we'll see different, some restaurants like Casa de Lutz have been here forever, and hopefully they will be here forever, which really focuses on macrobiotic, vegan food, which is wonderful. We used to have a couple raw restaurants like Beets that unfortunately are no longer around, but were a great resource for the community. And now we see different pubs like the Beer Plant that are popping up, and some other just wonderful like food trucks and things like that as well. So we're seeing a lot of plant-based options in Austin, and have always had a pretty regular appearance of plant-based specifically plant-based restaurants, which is great. The other thing is you see that there's a lot of plant-based items on all the recipes in Austin, or in all the restaurants in Austin, which is really great. Now, as far as food trends and ready-to-eat foods, especially in the grocery industry, that's something that's changed a lot too. Before, when I first started this, and we were talking with Forks Over Knives the other day, it was pretty much impossible to find ready-to-go foods that fit the whole food plant-based lifestyle. And now you're able to find it all over the place. Forks Over Knives even has like meals that you can buy in the frozen section to be able to go. Engine 2 has tons of different products like that as well too. But on ready-to-eat foods, you'll see a lot more on grocery shelves that are plant-based and ready to go, which is nice. Now, as far as trends on that, you'll see a lot of different things. More recently, in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of kind of meal kits where you'll be able to kind of buy the things to be able to assemble a meal in less than 10 minutes when you get home, which is great. I always recommend people do that. It's kind of like making your own mise en place at home. So you can do that as well. But we did see a lot of the kind of meal kit plans that were happening at grocery stores, and a lot of made right here items instead of having, a commissary kitchen or somewhere else, and then bringing it all to the grocery store, making it at the grocery store, which is nice because it's fresh and you know that the employees there have actually made it. All the dates and everything are correct on them as well, but really going for that made right here, fresh and local, I think are probably some of the bigger, things that I always try to go for on trends. But you'll see a lot of the meal kits are actually a big popular one as well too, because people just don't have the time to do the prep themselves, but they might want to do a little bit of cooking to be able to continue that as well too. But as far as ready to eat foods in that segment, it's always blossoming and growing, and there's a lot of different things happening in it. The whole food plant-based, for forks, we still see a lot of things with oil in them, not specifically for forks, but if you're on the forks plan, a lot of the grocery stores still have oil in them, so make sure to read the labels on anything you're getting as well too. But I hope that helps. Bernadette, I want to make your recipe sog and tofu paneer without the coconut milk. Sorry, this got left out of my question. So you were talking about the Whole Foods cookbook that's actually behind me here, that one of my recipes is in, and you want to do the sog paneer with tofu. So I do have you marinate the tofu in coconut milk with nutritional yeast and a couple other spices. I think it was, can't remember all the spices, but if you're going to leave that out on the sog paneer and tofu, that's fine. So what I would do is just do a marinade of the tofu, and just leave out the coconut milk. You could do an almond milk, would actually still get that kind of nice creamy, texture that you're looking for. And then do nutritional yeast and maybe a couple of other spices I recommended in that one. I'm not 100% sure what the other ones, I think it was, well, I'll leave it to you to remember, but I do remember that there was nutritional yeast, probably a little bit of salt because paneer is salty. But that has been a stand-up recipe, for years for me. In fact, John Mackey asked me to contribute to that book, and that was one of the ones that I used to be a personal chef for him. So that was one that he wanted in that book all the time because he loves making it himself too. But so yeah, instead of doing the coconut milk, try an almond milk to soak the tofu in. Just mix in your nutritional yeast and a little bit of salt to be able to get that little cheesy kind of flavor and texture into it. And it'll soak some of the fat up from the almond milk as well. I'd probably recommend doing that overnight too, just to make sure it soaks up really well. Maybe press the tofu beforehand too, so when it presses all the liquid out, it'll soak up all the almond milk to get that naturally fatty kind of texture to it as well. Hope that helps, Bernadette, and happy reading with that one. It's a fun book. The Sarno brothers actually helped a lot of the recipes with that as well. So Patty, what is back slicing chives? I don't think I've ever heard of that before. Let me just do a quick search here. Back slicing chives doesn't come up on anything for me. So I'm not 100% sure what to answer there, Patty. There were a couple different ways that I know to slice chives. One of them is cutting them at like a 45-degree angle to be able to get like the green kind of like nice triangle looks that you can get on them. the other one is to be able to slice them down the center and then put them into an ice water so they curl up really nice, and you can use them as kind of additions to the top of dishes as well. And then just traditional slicing that I know of. But I'm not really familiar with the back slicing of chives. But if somebody does know, you can always write it into the question queue here and we can answer Patty too. Sorry, I can't answer that better for you. All right, so Omar, hi, I've got young kids, 5 and 3, very attached to processed food. Suggestions to help them move away from that. So that's actually great. I actually have a 4 and 2-year-old, so it looks like we're right a year ahead there. The best thing I can say is to keep trying everything. I mean, all the time, give them vegetables. And I mean like raw vegetables that you just cut up like crudité. And the thing about kids is they're not going to like it every single time. So I would just keep trying them. My kids will now, do like cucumbers and carrots, and they'll even do broccoli, but it took a long time to be able to get them to it. Like they're not just typically going to eat raw broccoli. I do kind of a parboil on it, so it has a little bit of crunch to it, and then take it out and put it into an ice bath. So it's easy for them to be able to chew and digest as well too. But the biggest advice I can give you on getting kids to be able to eat more vegetables is have them try it, and often. Your tongue completely redoes itself, every 7 days. So I always say if you try to like stop eating salt, like 100% no sodium for 7 days. If you went to your favorite, vegan shop and got French fries the day before, and then 7 days later without any sodium, you tried the same French fries, they would be unbelievably too salty for you, because your tongue completely regenerates in 7 days and your flavor profiles will change. That same thing happens with kids. They're going to completely be rejuvenating their taste buds all the time. So my biggest suggestion is to be able to have them try it. I do it all the time with my kids at the table. Like they're like, I don't want that, I don't like it. And I'm like, well, you haven't tried it. If you just try it and you don't like it, you can spit in my hand. That's fine. And I do that all the time. And they get a little bit of a kick out of that, but half the time they're like, that's really good. And even for things that they've tried before that they didn't like. So I think the biggest thing you can do is be able to keep trying on things. Let them see you eat them too, because if you're just giving, the kids something that you're not going to eat, that's not going to work as well. Look for replacements on the flavor profiles too. So, if they're looking for something that's really processed like chips, look for something that's got a little bit of crisp to it. Maybe add a little bit of lime juice to get a little bit of, the kind of the perk or the, the seasonings that they're looking for. I know a teacher in a grade school that I was helping with whole kids that was looking for a replacement for Takis. And the reason that the kids in her class were so into Takis was because they were really bitter and really spicy. So she started doing jicama with lime juice and cayenne pepper, and it totally sought the need for the kids looking for that really sour, bitter, and spicy, right? So it worked really well. Did they stop eating Takis 100% of the time? No, but they weren't eating them as much as they were before too. So my best advice, Omar, is to be able to keep trying with the fruits and vegetables as often as possible. And even if they say they don't like it, try it again. A month later, it's totally okay. Give it a shot. And if they don't like it, you have to be okay with it too. There are lots of things even adults don't like, and there's reasons for it, and that's totally okay. But even as adults, I recommend that we keep trying things over and over, unless you have some sort of allergy, of course. All right, Gloria, good afternoon, chef. I have arthritis in my hand and noticed lately it's causing problems when lifting my heavy pot. Can you recommend pots and fry pans that are good quality and light in weight? That I don't have a specific brand on that. I do have pots that are very heavy, and I have ones that are very light. And typically the ones that are really light are actually going to be my aluminum pans, which I'm not a huge fan of. I usually like to have steel pans or copper, in the bottom and then steel on the top, because that way the heat works really well for them. But I think my lightest pans are actually aluminum made, and I don't usually recommend people to have aluminum pans unless it's, of course, the same way it's a copper on the bottom and the steel on the top. if you could do the aluminum in the bottom and the steel on the top, that would probably help with your weight wise. But aluminum tends to bleed into food a little bit if it has direct contact with. So I typically don't recommend doing that, but that might be something to be able to try. Or if you're looking for something with like a nonstick surface, you could still have the aluminum and then the nonstick surface is painted basically over the top. My big thing with a nonstick pans, though, is if you get a scratch on it, it's pretty much done. So don't spend tons and tons of money on nonstick pans. It used to be like some of the brands would have like lifetime guarantees, but even those nowadays, if it's a nonstick, they don't give a lifetime guarantee. So don't spend a ton of money on nonstick. I actually buy my nonstick pans at a restaurant supply store. They are aluminum, but the aluminum doesn't bleed through the nonstick surface, so it definitely makes for a lighter pan. I hope that helps a little bit. I wish I had a more definitive answer for you, but that's probably be my biggest recommendation, just because aluminum is so light. Debbie, hi chef. I purchased a medium-sized Excalibur dehydrator. Fun, and it doesn't truly fit in my kitchen too well. My question is this: how frequently do you use a dehydrator, and is it worth keeping? Thanks. Oh, Debbie, you're running into the dehydrator problem. Excaliburs are great. I used to have the really big Excalibur, and it was wonderful. Lost it in a relationship, I think. But luckily I married a woman who had one, and it's a different one. It's not an Excalibur, but it was much smaller. And I actually love that because I don't use a dehydrator a ton, but some people do. Especially when I was doing catering, I used it a lot more, especially the Excalibur version, because I would be doing all kinds of like raw chips or crackers or, raw tacos, and all kinds of fun things that you can do with those. Same with the fruits and stuff like that. Wonderful things to be able to make with dehydrators. So it really depends on you. In fact, we are cooking raw kale chips, I think, right now in our dehydrator. So it really depends on some of the things you eat. Like if you're, like our family loves kale chips, so we make them pretty darn regularly, and it's probably once we kind of get in the methods of it, it's probably every couple weeks. But there's also like months at a time, like 6 months at a time, where we never even get it out. I know Chef Barton just shared something on his garlic live event that you can always search on the live events here about dehydrating garlic for like months to be able to make a black garlic, which is pretty cool. And that's like a natural fermentation process. So there are a lot of fun things to do with dehydrators. The Excalibur is kind of big, but it is one of the best on the market. Now you can, of course, just go down in size on your dehydrator. And that's basically what we did, is we went with a smaller version. It can't do as much, so I'm not doing my catering out of it, but I'm not really doing my catering anymore. So that's totally fine. But that is a complete personal preference to you, Debbie. And I hope it works out for you. Or you find another place to be able to put it. Doesn't always have to be on your kitchen counter too. You can store it somewhere and then bring it out when you're needing it. So hope that helps, Debbie. All right, Claude. Hello, Chef Marek. Do you have any tips on how to use Aquafaba and salad vinaigrettes? Yeah, actually, that's a wonderful way to be able to use Aquafaba. It's a wonderful thickener, and can thicken up a lot of things as well too. So that's typically where I'm going to use it, is if I'm making a vinaigrette and I'm not going to use the oil, which is a natural emulsifier. The Aquafaba is actually a great alternative to be able to do that. So if you're making just a simple vinaigrette, let's just say a balsamic vinaigrette, you put your balsamic in, you put your Aquafaba in. You don't have to use a ton of the Aquafaba, but the Aquafaba, maybe a little bit of water, and then your herbs, depending on what you're doing. I also like to do fruit sometimes, like dried fruits. So I will actually blend all of that together in a high-speed blender, and you'll see that it will emulsify because of the Aquafaba, and you'll get like nice kind of bubbles that will capture all the different flavors in those. So you can still do that without using any oil, which would typically be your emulsifier. So a wonderful way to be able to make oil-free vinaigrette. So just a little bit of water, your vinegar, the different herbs or fruits or whatever you want to be able to put into it. And it thickens it up really, really nice. So instead of having a vinaigrette just pour out like a water, it'll actually pour out like a thicker, even like a ranch or something like that, where it has that thicker consistency to it. All right. Patty, can you offer any suggestions on how to use mushroom powder? Ooh, one of my favorite ingredients that I always have it in my pantry. So for those of you who don't know what mushroom powder is, it's dried mushrooms and you put it into a blender until everything's powder, basically. I do a kind of couple different mixes, so I'll actually use like a shiitake and a button, the cremini, and depending on if, sometimes I might do a shiitake, sometimes those are a little overwhelming. But you end up blending the whole thing up and you have this nice little powder that you can use for a host of different things. And I use it as an umami enhancer, so in a lot of ways that people that cook meat would, cook like meat in a pan and then leave the juices from the meat in the pan. That's kind of like what you're doing with the mushroom powders. You're adding umami to other dishes. Now, with mushroom powder, you still have to rehydrate the mushroom to be able to do it. So I'll often use it in soups or sauces, but I'm not going to use it raw over something because, quite honestly, it's kind of a funky smell too. It's kind of a weird smell when it's just a dried, mushroom on its own. But if you have something that you can kind of melt the powder down into, it's a great way to add nice hints of umami into something. Or if you're doing something like a dashi or like a mushroom broth, a wonderful way to be able to add lots of umami and a huge mushroom flavor to something as well too. I use it in a host of different ways to be able to add just a nice, more complex flavor to something that really kind of rounds out the palate really well. So putting like a fat and an acid with that umami from the mushroom powder and all those things combined in there really help create a depth of flavor in many, many meals. But again, wouldn't use it on anything that I couldn't melt it down into. So you wouldn't put it onto like a salad or something like that. But yeah, great product. Mushroom powder, easy to make and lasts forever too, which is wonderful. Thanks for the question, Patty. Marcy, hello, Chef Dan. Thank you for doing these live events. Have you made silken tofu? Suggestions? I have a hard time sourcing organic silken tofu with my suppliers, and I'm looking to making myself. Marcy, that is not something I have done. In fact, my 4-year-old wants us to start making tofu. I have seen the process, I've seen how to do it, but I've never made it myself. And it's a little bit of a messy business, right? So, but you're basically, cutting down the edamame, and you're going to float it in the water. There's a whole process to it, but probably a bit too much to go into now. And since I've never done it firsthand, I don't want to lead you down the road too much. But I would love to be able to see follow up on that. If you are making some tofu, silken tofu at home, please hit us up on our social media account so we can see that. Put it on our Instagram or just tag us in it or something like that, because that's wonderful. Totally want to be able to do it. Have not made that jump yet into it though, but great product to be able to start making. All right. So Lynn, what about anodized aluminum pans? Is that safe to use? I'm not 100% sure on that, Lynn. On aluminum pans, it's kind of been one of those things like most restaurants use aluminum pans. It's something that we all come into contact quite often with. The reason they use them in most restaurants is they're light and they're affordable, but I have heard for a long time that aluminum pans are not the best because they do leak some chemicals into your food. So the different process to them, I'm sure there are processes that they've come up with to be able to make them safer. But the issue that I have with them is just like the nonstick, once that coating starts to kind of come off a little bit, that kind of get into your food. So I'd have to do a little bit more research on anodized aluminum to tell you the truth, Lynn. I don't want to steer you one way or the other. If it's the pans that you're using now, that's okay. I mean, don't go out and buy all new pans just because I'm like, Dan Marek doesn't like aluminum pans. Don't do that. Do a little bit of research on them, see what works best for you. And if it's specifically around the weight and lifting on them, there might be other alternatives like ceramic out there too that you might want to invest in. I hope that helps. L, that is Canadian or US glass companies making pans and pots heavy metal free. I heard new reports of leaching even from steel. Iron is associated with Alzheimer's Association after the doctor told me to use it daily for over 2 years. It's hard to find glass companies. Yeah, so there are I don't know of any the glass companies making those heavy pans, like like a saute pan. I mean, I use kind of things like Pyrex all the time. I have heard things about the iron associated with Alzheimer's disease, but I haven't seen any reports directly, from that. And I have heard about steel leaching as well too. So I guess we just can't cook. So there's again, kind of picking your battles and seeing which one works best for you. If it is something that you're worried about, do a little bit of individual research to make sure that you're getting exactly you're getting into what you want. I use a combination of all of those things at my home personally. I use steel the majority of the time, but I use iron, I use nonstick, I use aluminum as well, and I use glass baking dishes pretty much exclusively. So there's a host of different things that I use on these too. So really kind of, picking the worst enemy and getting rid of those ones and joining on the side you want is probably the best thing to do for that. Thanks for that comment. Valentina, hello, Chef Dan. What would be the best egg replacement for gnocchi? Thanks. I actually don't use egg in my gnocchi at all. I just use potato and flour, and it works wonderfully. On the Plant-Based Pro class and the new Plant-Based Pro class and the Plants Plus class, I actually did a video on them showing how you can make gnocchi just using flour and potato, and they work fantastically. I have seen other people use Aquafaba in them to be able to hold up to it, but honestly, it depending on how wet your potato is, it works fine without the egg in it. So Aquafaba would probably be a close second, but honestly, I would just make it without because it works just fine. The nice thing about doing the gnocchi with just the potato and the flour is you get that fine mix to see how close you are. If it's like sticking to your hands, you don't have enough flour in it. If it's just kind of balled up and completely a ball, like you're probably using a little too much flour into it as well too. So, but yeah, for egg replacement and gnocchi, I would say just don't use the egg. Lynn, I've been reading that hemp milk is nutritionally best to use. What do you think? Hemp milk does have a lot of great nutrients, and there's a lot of great things in hemp for you. It does strip some of the things out of those, and they might add a little bit in depending on the company. But that's a personal preference as well, too. So hemp milk is wonderful for nutrients, a little bit more expensive than some of the other ones. But they're also like the almond milks, the soy milks, those are all things that they would add things into as well too, depending on the company. So that's, again, a personal preference. Look at the nutrition label on the back to be able to see that you're getting the nutrients that you want to. And always, of course, read the ingredient label. If there's something in the ingredient label you can't pronounce or your great grandmother's never heard of, probably not the best whole food option for you. But the nice thing is that hemp milk you can actually make pretty easily at home too, by just using a high-speed blender and water, and then a sieve to be able to get out all the chunks if you need to. Oat milk is another one of those things that a lot of people like too. There are pluses and minuses to all of those things though. So but I have heard hemp milk being highly nutritious, which is a great option to be able to have too. All right, Omar, another question here. Thanks for the answer. Another question. I love garlic, but heartburn. Any way to cook with garlic that reduces its effect? That really depends on a bit of how much garlic. Raw garlic tends to be able to give heartburn a lot faster than cooked garlic. So make sure you're cooking with it. I'm always mincing mine down really, really small. Don't add it right away into a dish, but make sure that you are adding it in maybe after you're caramelizing your onions or something like that, but just getting some of the, make sure it's cooked a little bit with that. I've heard of people boiling garlic before adding it to dishes too, to be able to get rid of some of the effects that are coming from that might cause that. But that's probably the best way that I would say is make sure it's cooked beforehand, and then also maybe try the boiling trick before too. But thanks so much for your question, Omar, and thanks everybody for all your questions today. Hopefully it's been highly informative for you, and happy cooking, and we'll see you at the next live event. Have a great day.